Hey, greetings, everyone. Hey, here's my good friend John Cato, and Gagan Hunter, as you can see on the screen. And we're going to talk a little bit about, the hemp industry, our past, how we got a little bit, how we got into it, and what we're currently doing. And we're hoping that this conversation will help others who want to get into the hemp space or maybe into the hemp space and looking to expand. So, my good friend John Cato, how are you doing?
I'm doing blessed, brother. I'm doing blessed. How are you doing today, Gagan?
I'm doing fantastic. So yeah, me and you kind of started in this game about around, how we met around about 2018 with the Farm Bill and how that started. I was working in, Miami, with a company called Earth Science Tech, and we were working on a joint project. We came up with this idea, me, you, and our sister friend Yvette. We were looking to do some educations for African American, historically Black colleges. That was one of my ideas and focuses. And, me and you had talked about that. And then that actually happened in 2019 down in Tuskegee University.
Yes.
And so, John, just tell me a little bit about, uh, you know, 2018, where we were at, and what kind of start, where we're going now, where we at in the future, where we want to go in the future, and where we at in the present.
Okay. So, starting in 2018, I was doing presentations at different agricultural entities to assist farmers with obtaining their hemp license and gaining entry into the industry. And I believe we met via one of the activities in North Carolina, presenting to one of the Native American tribes, the Wakamasuian tribe, I believe, to be exact. So I think that's what started. Both myself coming from the agriculture activity and you coming from the processing activity, we were both gaining entry into the hemp industry by taking the initiative. Once the 2018 Farm Bill had passed, we took what we felt was our subject matter expertise and really took that as an initiative. At that time, I think we both agreed that there were two different angles to go at as far as a supply chain standpoint, whether it was with the consumption model for CBD or to look at the industrial usage application of the hemp plant. And at the time, the business was really geared toward the consumption model. I believe even at that time, correct me if I'm wrong, there was really a focus on just cultivation. There wasn't a lot of farmers that had gained entry. There wasn't a lot of material available anyhow. And it was really just important for people to get out there, get their license, and get started.
Yeah, that's correct. And both me and you have been in what they, I guess, called multiple state operations. Or I started in North Carolina. I looked at what was happening with the legislation and with the hemp. Went to a lot of the meetings there in North Carolina back in 2017, 18. And then then I moved to Florida, and now I'm in California, which is interesting. Florida just finally initiated their hemp bills, taking them quite some time, but I don't want to digress on that. So one of the things that I thought that was really important was that how we came together and we worked with educating farmers. And I recall back then, and that was in 2019, we did the first conference down in Tuskegee University at Historically Black College. And we were educating farmers who wanted to gain entry because Alabama had they were about to open it up. So there was like some regulations, it was some, and so farmers were, issues like, where do I get my seed? Okay. Where can I legally grow? And we discovered as we went through that, each state had its ups and, its pros and cons. But one of the things back at that time was that Alabama didn't have any really processors.
Mm-hmm.
So and then the other issue was farmers being able to buy good seeds. And we found out that many of the farmers who jumped in it too quick had bought some bad seeds, and they were stuck with they were kind of in a bad situation because now they had bought the seeds didn't work, and that's where me and you came into the market because you had some genetics that you could offer to some of those farmers down there.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I think one of the examples that you gave, when we gained entry, not every state came online at the same time. The USDA came out with their guidance, but it was up to each state to implement it. And so I think that was a testament to our initiativeness, right? I started farming in Arkansas, and I started to cultivate in North Carolina, and I was residing as a resident in Texas with operations pending and planning in Colorado. So I think you made the excellent point that we did not wait for the state's regulations to restrict us. We had to kind of go with what was permissible at the time. I think that's kind of important because as we assist with sharing our story and helping others, looking at the current obstacles doesn't really hold someone to entry if they think outside of the box. There's always going to be obstacles that we have to be prepared to face just because of the infancy of this industry. I think as we move forward and there's a little bit more maturation in this industry, then we can kind of see a little bit more of stabilization. But for right now, I think newcomers into the industry have to be assertive, and they have to be innovative, thinking outside of the box, and really go after solutions that clients are willing to pay for. Don't just go down the traditional aspects like what's been done in the past.
Yeah, and that's very true. One of the things I remember when I was in cannabis school, I went to the graduate of Oxford University. And I remember my professor saying, "Hey, in most businesses, 1+1 = 2, but in the cannabis space, 1+1 can equal 5." And that was very true because I've watched things change very quickly. Regulations change. Businesses will then have to pivot. So you have to be very nimble, and you got to have some strong determination and have a passion for this because things do change, and you're going to have to pivot. But there are also some basic business principles that I want to say that individuals who want to get into this need to do. One is you need to have a business plan. Okay. You need to get a ENN number with the government. You need to set up your business like you would set up any other business. You should definitely incorporate your business, in the corporate structure, LLC or C Corp or whatever, but do your homework. Do your homework. And also, too, you got to know what is going on legislatively in your state because when I was in North Carolina, first they had rules, then the rules changed, then, it was testing. Okay. That's another thing. When they got into the game was like, well, we are going to test your crop to make sure that it's below the 0.3 for THC. But then what happened was, as you know, John, the USDA, the federal government got in and they had their own guidelines. They wanted a DEA lab to be able to test. So farmers, got to shift, got to jump through hoops. Also, too, many farmers growing in those states, security. I talked to one African American farmer who has been growing successfully in North Carolina, and I talked to him over the summer. I wanted to do a tour and visit his farm, and he said, I'm gonna be honest with you. I put out my information and I had all these people come to my farm, and I'm not comfortable with that. So he was even hesitant at this point, even though we had a relationship, to give me the information of the location of his farm because he had some theft. People found out where he was. They went down there and stole some of his crop. So, these are some of the problems that, folks come into. And I think you can probably talk to really best about the other thing is starting with good genetics, deciding what you want to grow, whether you want to grow for what? The CBD market, you want to grow for the fiber market, the grain market, which still is in its infancy. So talk a little bit about, how important it is when you get into the game, choosing what area you want to get in, because it's farming. So you also got to start with good genetics. Talk a little bit about that, because that's one of your area of expertise, John.
Well, I think that you stated it best. Like anything else, everyone has to approach this as a traditional business, because that is what it is. It is a business. Whether you are entering as a cultivator, whether you are interested in processing, whether you have distribution channels in mind, this is still a business. And so I think by doing that, the business plan will dictate the person to perform a SWOT analysis. When they look at the strengths and the weaknesses of their current opportunity, therefore it will lead them into the opportunities and the threats that they are going to face. I think most importantly, I think we really touched this during our conversations at Tuskegee, educating the farmers on what they did not think about and what was not readily accessible from the online channels. And I think part of that problem, and I think we had to really channel that home to the audience, the 2018 initiative was a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
The ability for the government to issue out the federal mandate was great for those of us who were already ahead of the curve. But for so many others that looked at this as a viable alternative during a down economic market, they weren't given the foundation to really be successful entering into this market. So people heard a lot of the positives as far as the opportunities for revenue generation, but they did not hear any of the negatives or the things that they should have thought about as far as contingency planning. Something as simple as security with your crop. Now, someone who has been into the industry prior to the 2018 Farm Bill would know firsthand that you would want to keep your grow location absolutely secret because of the security risks that are involved with it. But so many farmers I saw make the fatal mistake of wanting to invite the world out to their farm to show them what they were doing because they felt that that was the need for revenue generation. And they found out the hard way that that was the worst thing that you could do. Second, not having a relationship with the processors. Most states force the farmers to have a LOI, a letter of intent, before they could be issued their license. But the state never did anything to ensure the validity of those LOIs. So many farmers were left harvesting a crop, sending their material to a processor who did not have the capital to compensate the farmer, who did not have the capacity to process the material harvest in the negotiated time. And many farmers were left high and dry. So these are several things that I think farmers would generally need to understand before they really went through getting their license. And you would expect that the state agencies, the Department of Agriculture, to be able to supply this type of consultation. But unfortunately, because of the time of entry and how they implemented the laws, that just didn't happen. Yeah. So most individuals, they need a consultant. Even year 3, year 4 implementation of the Farm Bill, most individuals still need a consultant that has the expertise to guide them through, whether they're cultivators, whether they're processors, more importantly, having a viable supply chain to actually create revenue for the product that is grown and created.
And that's so very true, John, because I as a consultant, I was consulting with a gentleman who I had known. He got into the hemp game. This is in North Carolina, South Carolina. He got into the hemp game. So he came from another industry. So he got in it. He wanted to know, he was growing, he was learning how to grow. He was learning all those hurdles. But then, like you say, when it came time to harvest, they discovered that there was only like one processor. So you had all these farmers working with this one processor, and the process, they couldn't keep up with the demand. They never got paid that year. So this gentleman came to me and said, hey, he realized, and I had told them early on that I thought, for me, or what I thought that where the game was into the processing, because I could see, farmers usually always kind of, unfortunately, get the short end of the stick, no matter what kind of crop that they're growing. It's always a risky business. And being able to turn that, the cannabis into what I call, gold money, it was back then, and still mainly so, is into how do I process it, turn it into an oil. Well, as a consultant, and I'm telling this story for other people, what I often find is that in this industry, we do have some shady actors, and it's a trust issue. So you have to go into it almost saying that, verify and then trust, or trust, but you got to verify it, because people were telling you a lot of stuff during that time. People got in and lost a lot of money. So I talked to this gentleman. I had a meeting with him. He had some investors. He told me, I met with some guys, and I told them that, hey, they wanted to do processing. So I prepared a proposal, contacted my sources. I asked them to sign a contract. Now, this is very important. Always you got to have a contract. But when I said we're going to sign a contract, it was crickets. So I wasn't going to give up the work that I had done. The cost for them to do that was somewhere about, depending on how we looked at how much scale they were going to be able to do based upon how much they were growing. They were going to work with other growers. So it came out to be about $800 to $1 million, somewhere around that, for a really good. So I gave them the ballpark figures, and then I didn't hear nothing. It was crickets. And I realized that, I had to protect myself, my intellectual property. So that's another issue for people who, have an invention, or they're creating something. They need to have a contract. They need that, work with a lawyer, hopefully, somebody in the field. So they need to do their due diligence. And so that was a very good lesson for me. I knew that I had to have a contract. And when I presented to them the contract, what my percentages would be, it was crickets. So I was glad that I covered myself.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that, because as you were saying that, that's exactly what's going through my mind. Unfortunately, individuals gaining entry into this industry, they're doing it for one of two reasons. Either they're doing it because they have a genuine passion for the plant and for the industry, or they're doing it because they see the viability of it being another alternative for generating revenue. Okay. Unfortunately, you can't. You need a little bit of both, and I'll explain a little bit of what I mean here in a moment. But you're going to have individuals who have a passion, individuals who have taken penitentiary chances, so to speak, who are active in the industry before it was federally legal or state legal. And then you're going to have those who just see a niche, and they'll do anything to protect the ability to generate revenue. Okay, so individuals like you and I, we have a passion for this plant. Thank God that the legislation allowed for us to practice this legally, in our time frame. But not everyone thinks of it that way. Let's just think back. And I think I shared, a little bit about myself. But I did my first term paper on the legalization of cannabis back in '84. freshman in high school, right? I've continued this through college. And so when it became time for the legislation to come, some of us have more than just intellectual property or innovations. We actually have validation for what we've done, and the solutions are ready to be implemented into the industry. The problem then becomes you have to have a business acumen to really be able to operate successfully in this industry because it is a business. So no matter what your passion is for the plant, whether you're the greatest hippie, the biggest pot smoker, or whatnot, if you don't have a business foundation, you're going to need to partner or work with individuals who do, because the best product still doesn't make for the best business opportunity. And I see that within every stage of the industry right now, hemp and cannabis. The best companies are able to merge both cultures. They're able to merge the traditional cannabis culture with business fundamentals that would allow an industry such as this to really prosper. And I think we're going to have that same challenge as we transition from the consumption space to the industrial space. Certain industries are, let's just say, they're more open to change than others. And sometimes change only comes as a result of catastrophe. So in the example of the construction industry, 2-3 years ago, you and I were both talking about the same initiatives that I'm working on now with production of hemp, right? The raw production of the epidermis of the plant for hempcrete production, for fabric production. Well, who can do this in an efficient manner to where it's cost efficient for current stable industries? Just because you have a product that has its benefits, like, I think a lot of people have had a chance to read about or hear about hempcrete, even though it's still new. Some of the benefits for have been shared: the mold resistance, the insulation properties for it. But what most people haven't shared, the reason the industry still has stalled, you hit on it, was processing capacity. And it's not because people don't want to process, it's they don't have the ability to process and make it economical compared to industries that are currently stable. And so that's where the innovation comes in. And I think we're going to launch into that with individuals who really want to help this industry grow. I think it's important to get away from the traditional model of, hey, let me just be a cultivator, let me get my grow license, or let me work with someone to process it into an edible or some type of way to consume it, and branch more into the STEM related fields where we come up with alternatives for everyday problems, whether it's the plastic pollution problem that we have in landfills and out in the oceans, whether it's the shortage of lumber or how it has an effect on our rainforests or our forests in general. Even the ability to produce bioplastics that are compostable. So these materials we can put back into the ground, it will decay within a 60, 90-day process, and we're actually helping out the environment. I think if we channel those activities, it'll help spur the industry. And that's what we're currently working on with our affiliation with the U.S. Hemp Building Association and the U.S. Hemp Feed Coalition. I currently try to help individuals who really want to get an entry into this market to think outside of the box and help me create solutions to everyday problems that we hear about all the time.
And I also think, too, John, individuals have to be I say in the meantime. So it takes time for things to scale up. Like when you say, in the case of, like, let's say the flower to CBD, in the terms of the hemp stalk and the curds to hemp creek, there still is a process that goes through to scale up the production to be able to do it on a bigger scale so that it is economically viable. And that may not happen in the first year. That might not happen in the second year. So, but what do you do? So we kind of talked about that. So, some of the ways is like, hey, I can grow, maybe sell flour. Now, some states, then they put a damper on now. You can't sell flour. The state of California just came out with a thing that you can't sell flower in California, but you can sell it outside the state. So, you got those type of things. The other thing is that you may have to do white label. You may have to develop a product. We talked about that. Get the product, pay for somebody, put your label on it. Online sales, internet, you may have to do that. You may have to do multiple things. Now, what's interesting is that since 2018, I did a little research. It was about 3,500 brands. Today, in 2021, there's about 2,000. So 1,500 of those brands disappeared. And which I knew because there was a lot of, crap out there. But those are the examples of like, how do I, my long range goal is like, we want to do hemp creek. We want to do hemp growth for hemp production. But currently, I still got to maybe make some money. So maybe I'll diversify my crop. I'll grow some for CBD. And if I don't have a bad crop, I can buy the oil. Now, it's interesting. The price of biomass has dropped and continues to drop. Now, but which has been stable and increases is the crude oil, the distillate, and now the big thing is the Delta 8, So those are the things. So you may have to get into some Delta 8. Well, maybe I might have to buy it from somebody else, put my label on it to keep viable but that's where your business plan comes in. You have to adjust your business plan, as things change. So this is a tricky industry. It's not an overnight success. It's the long haul. You got to get in it for the long haul. It's not for everybody.
Without a doubt, I think you stated it best. And I think even going to those derivatives, you still have to have your due diligence to understand what is permissible, not only in your state, but in the county region that you live in, right? Because different municipalities will change what they allow. So, for example, Colorado, they have legalized cannabis. They were definitely one of the leaders, even in hemp production for CBD or for agricultural or for industrial usage. Mm-hmm. Delta 8 is illegal in Colorado.
Right.
But psilocybin mushrooms are legal, right? So you have to understand and know what is legal in your area. One hallucinogen is legalized and the other is still an intoxicant, being the Delta 8 or Delta 10 isomer, that's still under some consideration at the federal level. States have allowed it, but there's still some consideration at the federal level that you have to take into consideration. So if you're looking to retail a product and you want to infuse Delta 8, you better be sure that in the area that you're selling it is permissible. In the area that you're actually manufacturing is permissible. You want to understand what your long-term value plan is, like you had spoken out before, because, that may be a fad that you get into today and lose out tomorrow. I would say that everyone needs to be able to do their due diligence before just jumping in and starting a brand, starting a label. Doing their homework will allow them to really weather the long term. And like in any other business model, you would want to have several different revenue streams to counterbalance an unstable market.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because that's the other thing is you got to understand this is farming. So you may have to crop diversify. You may have to start growing another cash crop in between while you're working on your hemp. Now, I know you have a fertilizer company, so that's the diversity that people got to think outside the box. We talked about it with somebody. You were telling me about how the legalization in Mexico, the cartel went from selling. Somebody was talking about they went to selling some crazy meth or something like that, but then they had to switch, and now they're growing avocados.
Yes. So it's funny that you say that. I think for the individuals who are looking to gain entry into the agricultural sector, being able to do companion planting is a must. It'll help you continually maintain your soil health. It will continually reduce the chemical management costs or the fertilization costs that you'll incur. But it also has benefits that have not been identified to the cultivation of your plant. So different companion plants not only serve as a service to the ground, but they actually will assist in the cultivation of the plant, depending on the end product that the cultivator is trying to establish. Not to give out too much of what we're doing, but I would share this with other individuals. If we look at what is necessary from this industry, creating a product that has value, we are still going through the hopefully the last ends of a pandemic, right? So hopefully one of the things that the audience can take away from this is the need to have focus on personal health and wellness, right? Well, the cannabis plant, hemp is cannabis sativa, so we're talking about the same thing regardless of the THC levels. It's important for you to understand the medicinal benefits of not only the cannabis plant by itself, but in concert with other medicinal plants, because therefore we can get outside of just the intoxicant role for consuming or growing the plant, and we can get into more health and wellness. Right now, the cannabis plant is not approved by the FDA as a dietary supplement, but that doesn't mean that the current research and development that's happening with accredited laboratories won't bring that to the fold here in the very near future. So individuals need to look at certain derivatives of this. I'll share this much. We're currently producing and selling hemp protein powder. And so the powder protein is not derived from whey or soy, especially for those who are lactose intolerant by genetics. The hemp protein has a much more stable amount of viable protein per serving. So these are alternatives that individuals should look at. Health and wellness, utilizing the plant to create everyday solutions outside of just the intoxicant.
Absolutely, and in the hemp and the CBD world, we know that this plant, the beautiful thing about this plant, that it produces about 108 different cannabinoids, and we do know that it modulates the immune system, it modulates the nervous system, and the nervous system, and one other one I'm forgetting. But it's a plant that very few plants do all that. It creates homeostasis in the body. So, like you said, during this pandemic, your health is wealth. You got to keep your immune system high. Maybe you start an herb garden. Maybe you grow echinacea that you combine with it. Maybe you look into other companion plants that boost the immune system, that you can create something to have for yourself and your family and your community. So, definitely that's very, very important.
Well, you're talking to someone who has a compromised nervous system as a result of surviving an auto accident. So I utilize certain formulations for that, and utilizing indigenous plants to help in concert with the cannabis plant has been a game changer for myself and countless others in my family. And so utilizing certain plants that we grow, such as ashwagandha, the moringa plant, these are alternatives that actually help in the cultivation of your hemp garden. And they also have a way to create alternatives outside of just creating smokable flower or, trying to process into vape pens or gummies and things of that sort. You go with items that are locally attractive, and they could then gain regional, perhaps national support.
Well, that brings up a good point, because what's happening right now on a national level in terms of the transportation, we are seeing shortages in a lot of areas. For example, you were talking about the hempcrete. Well, the price of lumber has gone sky high. So it may get to the point that hempcrete is actually more economically viable than wood. That's an example. So you got to think locally, sourcing things locally, because you may not can get it in. We know that transportation and parts and stuff from China has been a major disruption in a lot of different industries. People can't get things. I also hear that there may be a food shortage. Not trying to get into fear or doom, but it's a reality. So, uh, in addition to your growing your hemp, you also need to be able to grow food for yourself and your community.
Well, I'll leave you with this one because I think you said something that was very, very prophetic, right? Within the hemp industry for lumber, as it results, as it relates to the lumber industry, the price of lumber has risen dramatically over the last 3 or 4 years. Has the supply of lumber dramatically decreased? Has the supply of manpower to actually chop and process lumber decreased? So, what has caused the increase in lumber prices? I'm not going to answer that here, but supplying alternatives is a way for individuals to think outside of the box and create instant demand for their product. And so I think as entrepreneurs, as business owners, farmers, processors, individuals who are looking to be facilitators, middlemen, look at what is of need. And I think your clients could then guide you to what they're willing to purchase. That would then allow you to create products that you have more of a successful chance of profiting from. You're not pushing a product that the industry doesn't need. Right now, I don't believe that there's a need for an increase of smokable flower influxing to the market.
Correct.
So me going and helping individuals get their license, if I'm paid to do it, sure. But I also tell them think outside of the box of how to protect themselves because it's more than just, taking someone's capital. And I think individuals who rushed into the industry and had faith in processors or, middlemen that did not have morals in place is something that is a lesson to be learned. I think if individuals think all the way through from how they can actually profit from their product, how they can help the industry versus just creating a product that's already there or saturating the market with something that's not needed, would be a better way to go for someone entering into the market.
I think that is excellent. I think we're coming up on about a time limit here. I guess my closing statement would be anybody getting into the cannabis industry. One, as we talked about, John, is that passion. You got to have that passion. Two, you got to have perseverance. Three, you got to do your homework, and you got to be nimble to be able to pivot as the industry changes. And you also have to diversify in terms of what you're doing while you wait for the industry to mature. Mm-hmm. As we talked about, guys that got into basic the hemp Greek game early on, they didn't know what they were doing, but they just after 2 years they became the experts. So
You're
it's
exactly
like
right. We began our first hempcrete construction build here in Q4, and it's really a matter of getting out there, doing your due diligence, but also making sure that you've done your homework and you have a solid contingency plan in place. And if that includes how do you continually reduce your material costs and ensure you have a stable supply chain, I think these are also things that individuals have to take into consideration. So, I think more than enough we've stated the need for individuals to hire consultants, subject matter experts, any industry, any entity that's looking to remain in an industry, they have to align themselves with subject matter experts in that industry. So I think consultation is a key for anyone who is looking to gain entry into this industry.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. We want to thank Daco. We want to thank Sharon Perry Thomas. We want to thank all the staff that helped us to make this possible for Black Cannabis Week. And for those who are going to be in persons there in Philadelphia, on the 24th, the 25th, 26th. That weekend, we'll see you in Philadelphia.
Yes.
For this will be our fourth DACO conference. So I'm very excited, and hopefully maybe we might see you, John.
Absolutely.
But I want to thank everybody, and this has been a pleasure and an honor to be able to, share this information.
Yes, thank you for the invitation from DACO, and looking forward to seeing you next weekend.